Hello, and welcome to the presentation, COVID-19 Scams Coming to You, from the Office of Consumer Protection. During the pandemic and the state of emergency, our phone lines are not answerable. The best way to reach us is through the email address you find on this slide. Other than consumer protection, education, and outreach, this agency also provides some much valuable services to the residents of Montgomery County. Mainly, we also handle disputes between consumers and merchants. So if there's any kind of outlay of monies for a consumer transaction that you don't like the results, whether the service isn't completed to your satisfaction, maybe what you purchased wasn't working when it arrived. If it's a consumer transaction and you're not happy with something that has gone wrong with this transaction, our investigators can help you through our complaint handling process. In addition to the email address on the first slide, when the office is fully open, you can actually speak to a consumer specialist by phone or in person. Our agency enforces the county's consumer protection laws, and we also license and regulate certain businesses. So if you're getting your car repaired, they should have our registration. If someone's coming into your home to repair a refrigerator or any other kind of home appliance or consumer electronic system, they should be registered with us. If you are getting towed, hopefully they have our towing license. And if you're building a new home, they should be licensed by us as well. So general statistics. In 2019, about 50% of all calls to cell phones were made by robodialers. And also in 2019, 40,000 reports, or a little over 40,000 reports of international scams had come in with reported losses exceeding $151 million. Also in 2019, Consumer Sentinel, which is a database that is created and maintained by the Federal Trade Commission, revealed 91,560 people had reported losing more than $276 million to scams based outside the US. And so these numbers sound staggering when you're looking at it in terms of how much money, but when you're looking at 40,000 or 91,000, it does give you a sense that reports of crime is very underreported. Now, COVID statistics look a little different. In June of 2020, the Hetherington Group reported that in New York and New Jersey alone, about 100 seniors paid over $1 million for the grandparent scam. Now, the grandparent scam is now being tweaked a little bit to say that I'm in the hospital, everybody here has COVID, I have a bill, I can't leave until until you help me with this money, or I'm in jail and everybody here has COVID, I need bail money. Obviously, the person who's calling, they are crying, they're hysterical, and that's so that you can't recognize their voice. Checkfish noted that 180,000 fake IRS websites were created to steal your stimulus money or to steal your information in the hopes of trying to get you stimulus money. The Federal Trade Commission has issued over 200 warning letters for bogus prevention and cures. Kentucky reported fake drive-up COVID testing sites where they were trying to steal your insurance data and other personal identifiable information. You'll hear me talk about PII, personally identifiable information, as we go along. The Maryland Secretary of State issued a warning on fake charity scams, whether it was charities that were helping folks that were in need or helping support our health heroes. There's a lot of fake charity scams out there. The FTC also started warning people about pop-up websites that were selling PPE that never existed because they just wanted to take your credit card information and never actually ship you what it is. And so Facebook and Instagram became some serious traffic of these fake pop-up websites that sold items that just never existed. And lastly, the WSSC had issued an alert about companies trying to sell you water filtration as a means of filtering COVID out of your drinking supply. But as you know, water filters is not really addressing the droplets that are a concern for COVID. So who's targeted? Normally, I think we all think that seniors have been targeted, and that's true. And that's because there's a quote unquote nest egg. Seniors were perhaps raised to be more polite and trusting. They're less likely to report fraud. And if you recall at the top of the program, I talked about how those stats were severely underreporting the number of fraud instances. And seniors tend to live alone, and so they don't have the ability to run problems by someone who's right there with them, and so they are more likely to be scammed. Now, what's interesting is that millennials are now rapidly increasing as a fraud target because they are too comfortable online. They trust flashy websites way too easily, and because they have this lack of financial literacy education growing up, they don't have 20, 30, 40 years of work behind them, they perhaps don't recognize a scam when it's coming. So what kind of common scams are out there, and how are they being modified for COVID-19? Obviously, with healthcare scams, we're seeing a rise in Medicare ID theft. Investments scams are rising as folks are being asked to invest in bogus cures and prevention. As I mentioned, the IRS stimulus payments became a feeding frenzy of fake websites. Mail fraud is increasing with work from home scams. And I also have already mentioned the grandparent scam. VA benefits, funeral and cemetery, those are also common scams. Unfortunately, with the rise in deaths, you may see a rise in funeral or cemetery scams as well. Woodchucks we'll talk about later, and SSN, Social Security number inactivation, is a perennial. You're going to get phone scam calls that claim your Social Security number has been deactivated due to fraud. Mortgage assistant fraud you may be seeing now with phone scams or emails that they are claiming to help you with your debt when really all they want to help them to is your PII or possibly some account information. Scripting of fraud. Fraud is fairly easy to script. They just want to get your attention fast and keep you on the phone or engaged in the transaction, not give you time to think. And it could go with, boy, do we have a deal for you, something that's enticing, to something threatening. You're going to be arrested if you don't pay. It could be cajoling. Your neighbors are doing it. Your friends are doing it. They might even name a neighbor down the street as somebody who sent them to you, and frankly, they've never heard of this person who's at your door or is calling you. Or they try to make you think that this deal won't last forever, and most deals do last beyond a deadline. So it's just a matter of taking the time, doing your research, thinking through this issue, and making sure that what you're about to enter into is a legitimate transaction. So phone scams will be the first type of scam we talk to. And as we always say, just hang up. Better yet, don't pick up. So how do the phone scams work? At this point, the voice over IP means that folks are calling from anywhere in the world, and they can spoof or clone the phone number. And that means they could be calling from Ukraine and make it look like they're calling from Silver Spring. And so that's how you see your caller ID will show the IRS is calling, the sheriff's calling, Pepco is calling, etc. Your caller ID lies to you. And that is why you should always let your answering machine or your voicemail pick up the phone and take the call so that you can screen it and make sure that you have those crucial 2 or 3 seconds to think about what you're hearing before engaging in the process. And those first 3 seconds are there just to scare you and try to get you to engage. So stats. Phone scams are the most underreported of all scams out there. In 2018, the FBI's Internet Crime Report only showed 26,379 people who had reported being a victim of a phone scam, and only 50 million was reported in losses. If you think about the number of phone calls you alone get, you can imagine that 26,000 is woefully underrepresented. It takes a little time, not much, a few minutes, maybe a minute a report, but you should report all of the phone scams you get to the Federal Trade Commission and the Federal Communications Commission. If you lose money, and I hope you don't, the FBI's ic3.gov website is where you should go. Recently, the FCC issued 12 voice over IP companies a warning about assisting or facilitating phone scams. So they are getting more aggressive with the very conduit of these phone scams, the voice over IP companies. So as I mentioned, the best way to avoid is to trust your instincts, but to screen the calls. If you don't recognize the number, let it go through. If it looks like it could be a number, but you're not showing up as being your neighbor by name, or you're not really expecting a neighbor to call you, let the voicemail pick it up. Let your answering machine pick it up and listen to who it is, and then you can call back. If you happen to pick up the phone and there's that blank air for a second or two, that just tells you there's a machine calling you. Hang up right away. And just always remember, the tech support scams are big right now because everybody's at home and trying to telework. IT will never call you. You've always had to chase them down. When you needed help, they're not going to call you to tell you that you've got an issue. And never close the deal. And by that I mean, don't give them information, don't give them credit card, don't give them any kind of valuable item until you've had a chance to research and call back on a number that you find. Oftentimes, scammers will give you a phone number that's really ringing to the next cubicle, and it's just one of their buddies who's another scam artist. So you never want to call back on the number that they give you. Find your own number for your bank or the IRS or whoever claims to be calling you. And always avoid saying yes, which is easier said than done, because they could be recording your voice and then slamming you into a verbal contract for all sorts of subscriptions and other nonsense. So use correct or other things that would show your assent, but not the word yes, because if you are talking through this conversation, they can't necessarily clip that to a offer for magazines, for example. Technology aids. So with your call blocking technology, Consumer Reports did a review, and it recommended No More Robo, which I think most people have heard of, but they also recommended Truecaller. Most of the major cell carriers have free apps that you can download, and they also are providing call filtering, maybe not call blocking, but they're more like a call filtering technology, so that when it comes up on your phone, it'll say unknown caller or spam or potential spam. If you want to have something on your landline at home, Consumer Reports recommended Digit One, HQ Telecom, and Sentry. You can also ask your phone company to block any quote-unquote anonymous phone calls. You can also block unknown caller on your cell phone as well. However, be aware that if you're calling your doctor's main line, your doctor may be calling from a phone number that is in the, their back office number, may not be in your contact list, and so it'll technically be an unknown number to your phone, and you could end up blocking a return call from your physician. So if you're going to do outright blocking, be aware that it could be too extreme. Now, there have been some recent regulatory changes. STIR/SHAKEN, which is kind of like James Bond, is a protocol that's there to help validate the phone number. And that's to try to combat this spoofing or cloning. That way, if the call has been validated, you know that the caller is actually calling from the phone number that's showing up on your caller ID. Doesn't mean that that caller isn't a bad guy who's a con man. It just means that they're actually calling from the number that's showing up on your phone. Right now, the Stir Shaken is working better inside a particular carrier, but they're working on cross-carrier information. So if you are on Verizon and the person calling you is on Sprint, it'll take a little time for that information sharing to happen for Stir Shaken to really get mobilized and be effective. The Traced Act was signed into law in January by the president, and that requires that the Shake and Stir protocol be free to you as a consumer. It increases penalties and provides other tools to the Federal Communications Commission to crack down on robocalls, and it actually requires them to create some rulemaking to protect us as consumers from spam calls and texts. So what are some of the COVID-19 phone scams? Obviously, there's the insurance scam, and I'm going to try and play a little bit of it.
This is Safe Health Central. To opt out of receiving calls, please call.
And so they're offering a lot of insurance products to help you with COVID. There may be a lot of loan modification scams coming your way. The Maryland Attorney General had just warned us about it not too long ago. Stimulus checks, that resulted in a flurry of phone scams that came by. Free test offers, travel cancellation, charities I think we mentioned, whether it's for the cure, for prevention, for people that are unemployed. Be aware with the wildfires out west, you may get some phone scams on charities trying to help out there. With bogus cures, preventions, contract tracers, you may be getting calls from those. They don't need your personally identifiable information. They don't need account information. They don't need money. They are not asking for those kinds of questions. You're going to get potentially work at home scams, job offers. If you have your resume up online, be really, really wary of folks that are calling you and not identifying the company, or they're calling you and providing you a Gmail or wanting to interview on Google Hangout, for example. Be very, very wary of the job process in that way. Student loans, I'm going to play a little clip of that.
Hello, this is Bradley Jasek with an important message regarding the effects of the coronavirus outbreak on your student loans. As you may have already heard, President Trump invoked his power as Commander-in-Chief by declaring a national... Hello, this is Bradley Jasek with an important message regarding the effects of the coronavirus.
Sorry about that. So yes, so you're going to get some student loan scams by phone as well. Be very, very careful. Again, don't close the deal. Don't provide information to anyone that calls you unsolicited. If you're not expecting that call, then it's not a transaction that you're originating. Be very, very wary. So cybersecurity, phone scams are not the only place you're going to see scams these days. So how do we avoid that? Identity theft is when someone steals your personal information and then uses it without your permission. So in a sense, it's the opposite of a power of attorney. It can not only disrupt your finances, your credit history, and take a lot of time to resolve, but most folks don't realize that it can also, medical identity theft can really cause a different kind of havoc. There are stories of folks who've been denied medications or life insurance because of health conditions they don't actually have, but because they've been a victim of identity theft, now the other person's health history has been mixed up with theirs. So where do you have all this information? Who's collecting it and what are they doing with it? So obviously your doctor's going to get some information from you, but no, they don't need your social security number anymore. And as a habit, a lot of doctors ask for it. It's been years since I provided it, and it's had no impact on their ability to get insurance coverage. Schools have information as well, protected by the Federal Education, FERPA, Records Protection Act, the Federal Education Records Protection Act. But that doesn't mean the schools can't be breached. So there's going to be information there. Work obviously has it. A lot of folks will, sign up for rewards with their grocery stores or restaurants because they want coupons. The restaurants just want to send you a coupon for your birthday and your anniversary. They don't need to know what your real birthday or your real anniversary is. Pick a day or two apart or some day in the same month, you'll still get the coupon. And the grocery stores, you just want the sales. They don't need to necessarily have all of your accurate information. Obviously, if it's connected to your pharmacy, you've got different considerations there. Online, that is going to be the greatest source of risk that you're going to have, and we'll be talking about more of that. So phishing, smishing, and hacking. Phishing is a mashup of the word phony and phishing, where they're going to fish for information using phony credentials. And it's when you are giving access to your personal information through emails. Beware of that sextortion scheme. I'm sure everyone has probably seen at least or heard of it, where it's a Bitcoin scam where they claim that they have evidence that you've been doing some things online, and they actually have an old password of yours. Well, keep in mind, chances are you've been a victim of a data breach, and if you use the same password across a lot of different platforms, they could very well have an old password of yours. Smishing is phishing through SMS, whether it's text or WhatsApp and those kinds of platforms. Again, it's you giving information and you giving access. Hacking is when someone breaks in and misuses and steals your data, and so the access is taken. You're not giving that access. So what kind of COVID-19 cyber scams are we seeing? Obviously, with phishing and smishing, you're going to see a lot of emails out there that are, link here, read an article about a cure, or, here's something that's great. I've got a new preventative medication. What can you do with these kinds of berries, for example, or acupuncture, and all sorts of bizarre concoctions that these scammers are coming up with. They may tempt you with hotspots and virus tracking. Who in your neighborhood has COVID-19? Click here. They could be pushing out hoaxes and misinformation. They could be pretending to be contact tracers, and again, asking for information that goes well beyond what a contact tracer would want or need. They could be offering you PPE. There's a lot of emails that are still coming out offering N95 masks. And these products are not available. They're just going to take your credit card information. We're seeing some indication that they'll send you an empty envelope, so they have some tracking data to show that something came to your home so that you can't contest it with your credit card company. Then there was this card that was being sent out and sold, the mask exemption card from the Free to Breathe agency. It doesn't exist. That's just money being thrown away for nothing. We've talked about the stimulus scams that came up. These were claiming to speed up your payment. If there's any more stimulus money that would come out, those websites and these emails will come back again. And again, we've talked about the fake websites. Just a quick topic on census cyber scams. Because the census is online this year, there could be some serious confusion that could be right proving grounds for scammers to try and use spoofed emails that's going to claim to be coming from the Census Bureau. You've got the invitation in the mail. You may get folks at your door. Be very, very careful about clicking on links. Hover over the email address. Make sure it's coming from a .gov website. Because identity theft is the #1 risk of census scams, but census is so important to make sure that we are all counted. Just do it safely. Job scams were a major problem at the beginning of the year. If folks were doing a search for census jobs, the first 3 hits in Google was not the Census Bureau. And so there was a lot of companies out there trying to take your money, take your information, and to help you get this job when you had to go through the Census Bureau directly anyway. And at the bottom, you will see a link where we have a lot of consumer-facing information about how the pandemic has handled or impacted your consumer rights and remedies, in case you would like to go to that website. So how do we protect against cyber scams? Obviously, deterring the loss is number one. You want to shred any documents. You don't want to give out your personal information like social security numbers, driver's license numbers, insurance information, unless you know that person has a right to seek it. You want to make sure that you are using passphrases. Password phrases are way safer than simple passwords. So if you think of something completely random, I like oranges, just use a 0 instead of an O, the $sign instead of an S, and now you've got a complicated password with letters, numbers, and symbols. You don't want to click on any unsolicited emails. Phishing, farming, spear phishing, whaling, these are all variations of the phishing that we talked about at a few slides back. And they are on the rise because so many people are working from home that they are trying to get folks when they are just harried, busy, and perhaps not thinking before clicking and inviting somebody in. You want to update your operating system on your towers, on your laptops, on your tablets, on your phones. Make sure there's a virus and malware software on your computers. And one other thing, don't put checks in your mailbox and then lift the flag. There's been a rash of thefts because what they do is they take the checks out. They'll steal all your mail, then they'll just take the checks if they find any, wash the ink off, it's called check washing, and then write it to themselves. So use gel ink when you can, because apparently you can't wash off gel ink. So issues for businesses and employees, I started to talk about a little bit. Make sure that working from home, you have a secure Wi-Fi network. WPA 2 and 3 is ideal. You want to make sure that you are talking with your employees about phishing and spear phishing and whaling. And spear phishing is when they're going after a specific type or position. Whaling is if they want to go after like the CEO, they figure out exactly who the assistant is, and then they'll try to go after them. You want to make sure that you talk about how to safely handle information. So if they have personal and sensitive records at home, you don't want them commingled, you don't want them sitting out. You want to talk about multi-factor authentication in order to be able to access work programs. You want to make sure their laptop or tower at home has a password protection. The PPP, there was a slew of phony applications and websites trying to take businesses who were trying to apply for the payment, paycheck protection programs. And tech support scams I mentioned are going to be on the rise and are increasing. Unemployment is going to be a cause of scams. Identity theft has been leading to denied benefits because you've got folks who have stolen identities and now are getting unemployment benefits in your name. A Nigerian crime ring had siphoned off hundreds of millions of dollars in unemployment benefits before they were stopped. There's been some stories about folks getting a termination notice with a link to Zoom to talk to their supervisor. But really that Zoom link is trying to lift your email address and password so that they can then break into the company system. And I think I mentioned before, fake job offers and fake interviews are on the rise. So be very, very careful. So how do you detect if you've been a victim of some kind of identity theft? Bills. If you get bills you shouldn't be getting, or if all of a sudden your mail stops or bills stop showing up, find out why. If you're getting denied credit or insurance or medical care, find out why. Those are usually the two big red flags, getting financial statements or account statements that you don't recognize, or if your mail just starts getting interrupted. And then things that get denied, if you get denied insurance, maybe someone's creating bad credit for you. You want to get your credit report and investigate it. If you notice, in addition to the big three of Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, I've also mentioned Innovis and NCTUE. Innovis is primarily used by landlords, but it's now becoming used more often. It doesn't provide a credit score, but it is a credit reporting agency. NCTUE is the National Consumer Telecommunication and Utilities Exchange. So if you choose to freeze your credit with the big three and don't freeze it with NCTUE, someone can open up an account at, say, T-Mobile and then order 10 phones in your name, for example. So it's important to know about the other two. And again, NCTUE doesn't issue a credit score, but it is a credit reporting agency. Annualcreditreport.com will pull you one credit report for free a year. You could, every 2 or 3 months, go to one of the 5 credit reporting agencies and ask for a copy of your credit report, and that way you get one free from them every 2 or 3 months. It depends on how proactive you want to be. If you are a victim of identity theft, the FTC website at the bottom of the slide is a great place to start about how to go about fixing that mess. A quick note about kids and cyber safety. Children are now online more than ever because obviously if they're in school online, they play online, they socialize online. So how can we make them more safe these days? You have to teach them to share less about their life, what they're doing, what they're feeling. Just share less, put less out there. Have them connect less, meaning see who they are connecting to. Are these adults? Are they children? Are they children within the community? Or are they across the country? You want to make sure that you are part of the process that is pruning their friends or those that may be following their accounts. Make sure that you know who these folks are. And you want to set as strict a privacy setting as you can so that these social media and online platforms are not discoverable by anyone and everyone. Passwords. Know your kids' passwords. Review their history. Look at their apps. Look at their games. Who are they talking to? Who are they playing with? What are they doing online? There is a manual that is circulating in a newspaper in Australia. Broke the story not too long ago. That there's a manual out there that's circulating on how to exploit children during the pandemic. And Fairfax County had a sting earlier this year, which arrested 30 men who were part of this kind of a crime ring. So it's just, at this point, it is doubly important to make sure that we're speaking and communicating with kids about staying cyber safe during the pandemic. Defending. So the 3 main ways that you can defend against identity theft is to lock down your credit report. And you can put a fraud alert, and what that does is that if you put a fraud alert on your credit report, anyone, including you, who wants to open up a new credit account has to go through a few more hoops before that credit is issued. It won't stop new credit from being issued. A credit freeze is just that. It is a complete freeze of your credit. You'll get a PIN, and if you want to unfreeze your credit, give it 2 or 3 days so that they can unfreeze it so that you can get access to it. Fraud alerts, credit freezes, they're free. In Maryland, you can put a freeze on a minor child's credit report. You can also put a freeze on the credit report of an adult that you have guardianship over. Credit locks are a new product that credit reporting agencies created when credit freezes became free. And it's like an app, and you lock or unlock your credit. Last I heard, it was like $20 a month. I don't know what, it may have been more or less now. And they're a species of contract. So if the lock doesn't work, you may only be able to sue them for damages. Whereas a fraud alert and a credit freeze, well, that's got federal statutory protections in place. It's beyond a contractual arrangement. If you've been a victim of identity theft, get a police report. And this is important for two reasons. One, if there's debt, you can then use that police report to help in fighting off debt collectors. If you have been a victim of identity theft, you can also apply to the MVA to get a restriction code on your driver's license that says, I was a victim of identity theft. That way, if someone uses your identity and gets pulled over or whatnot, the police can then run that, know that this has got a restriction, and ask more questions. Report identity theft to the FTC and the FBI, especially if there's losses, report it to the FBI. If your Medicare or Social Security numbers have been compromised, those are the numbers you want to call. Romance scams are definitely going to cause more than a broken heart. And with folks online now, with social distancing and the inability to really interact on a face-to-face level, online dating, distant dating has been on the rise, which means it is now a feeding frenzy, if you will, for catfishing. And that's a con game as any other con game. It just uses your heart to exploit you in a different way. Instead of fear, this uses love. So the con man will use social media, dating websites or apps or other venues and create a false identity. And they will use your public data, whether it's your social media page or whatnot, to figure out how they need to design themselves. They will use your interests, your faith, your hobbies, and create a profile that matches you. And their ultimate goal is money. In 2018 alone, $210 million was stolen through catfishing. And so scams on dating apps is thriving during the pandemic. So how does this work? What's the script? Well, they contact you and they sell themselves, and then they press you to communicate off platform, right? That way they can move it onto a more secure, perhaps encrypted messaging platform that gives them more protections. They'll groom you, they'll express strong emotions in a relatively short period of time. They might claim that they're in a foreign country that makes Skype or some other video chat difficult. They'll try to gain your trust. They'll start talking marriage. They may ask for, racy pictures because maybe down the road they're planning on blackmailing you for more money. Then there comes the sting. They need money for some reason. They're overseas. Can you wire money because they're stuck behind a closed border? That's apparently a big one. I've been laid off. Can you send me a little money for rent until I can find a job? I'm going to move where you are. And it doesn't have to be international. They could just be in a different state. And it'll always start small, a small amount of money, and then it'll just build and build and build. It's just a repeat event for them. They may even have someone will approach you as a friend who's going to help you get your money back. Oh, I've got a friend of mine, why don't you meet with so-and-so, and they'll meet with you and help you. They'll give you the money. I'm going to give them the money and they'll give it to you or something. So where do you report that? Obviously, the FBI is a great place. If Western Union have been used to wire money, you want to report it to them. The FTC has been very, very involved with Western Union as a conduit of wire fraud and perpetrating these kinds of scams. Door-to-door scams. You would think that you're not going to see a lot given the pandemic and social distancing. And in a sense, the door-to-door scams had dropped this past summer for that reason, but it bears having a brief conversation. There's legitimate folks that come to your door, and then there's the illegitimate ones. The legitimate guys who are going to be home accessories. They're selling you windows, doors, siding that could be solar. Folks that come for religious reasons, you're going to get potentially census takers coming to your door. This being a political year, you're going to get folks from campaigns coming to your door. If they're selling you something, the county's Department of Permitting Service should have a door-to-door license. Ask them for their license. They don't have it, they say they don't need it, just say goodbye, thank you, and shut the door. If you think that was a scammer at your door, definitely report it to us so we can put the alert out. The kinds of scams we see, you could have during the summer, underage kids coming door to door to sell magazines and candy that don't exist, and promising for money for a camp that might not exist. Home improvement folks will come to your door and they claim that they have leftovers from a neighbor's job or their slowest schedule. Who knows what it is? They may be landscapers, who we call storm chasers. We'll talk about them in a bit. Energy scams, folks coming to your door. I'm from Pepco. I want to see if you're paying too much for your energy. Can I see your bill? Imagine someone saying, I think you're paying me too much money and I want, out of the goodness of my heart, look at your bill and see if I can do you better. They just want to see your bill because they're not from Pepco. They want to get your account number. Maryland is a deregulated energy market, which means that Pepco can be your servicer no matter who is your supplier of energy. And so the folks coming to your door claim to be from Pepco, but Pepco will always be the servicer, and they think that's not really a lie or a half-truth. Coronavirus scams. Now, in New Jersey, the authorities reported that folks early on were going door to door claiming to be from the World Health Organization or the CDC doing testing. And we heard out of Scotland that folks were getting social distance fines issued to them. And that was, those are the only two COVID-related scams that I've heard of that have been door to door. Woodchucks, it's the name that we give to unlicensed home improvement contractors, usually landscapers, definitely storm chasers. And after a storm, they'll come in and try to clean up the debris in your yard, and while they're up in a tree, woodchucks, they notice your roof needs help, your gutters are down, there's dents in your siding, maybe they'll talk you into letting them into your home. Now they want to do painting and some odd jobs around the house. The con is to take the deposit and don't return. Or they take the insurance money, don't return, don't finish. If they do come back, it's often substandard work, often lacking the permits that you need. And if you want to resell the house, you're going to have to disclose that the work was unpermitted and done by an unlicensed contractor. So woodchucks are not just cute and furry little animals. Mail scams. It's not just about junk mail, that's true. So why do we have mail scams again? Well, it's because junk email filters have worked. So now scams are coming back to your mailbox. Mail marauders, I think we talked about earlier, are those who steal right out of your mailbox, and they're looking for checks so that they can wash the check or even counterfeit the check and just write a bunch of checks on your account. Porch pirates are those that steal your shipments from your door. So this is a new age form of shoplifting. They don't have to go into stores anymore and risk being caught. They just drive around. Where porch pirates meets identity theft is a real world example. One of our scam busters reported this. They heard the doorbell, UPS dropped off a box. They immediately brought it in, saw it was a box from Sprint. The doorbell rang within a minute. Someone claiming to be a UPS supervisor said the box was misdelivered and they'd like to take it back. And the scam buster looked at it, said, no, it's got my husband's name on it, we're going to keep it. And they opened it and found 10 iPhones. So this also shows you the NCTUE credit reporting agency story as well. Someone had opened a fake account at Sprint in her husband's name, ordered 10 iPhone X's, which at the time were $1,000 a piece, and had it delivered to their address. So there would be a tracking number showing that this box had arrived at the residence. And they were going to, the only thing they changed was the email address. And so the porch pirate was sitting in the neighborhood waiting for the confirmation of delivery and was just driving around picking up boxes. And had she not been near the door when the doorbell rang, she would have, the porch pirate would have stolen the 10 iPhones. Sprint would have had evidence that the box had arrived, and they would have been on the hook for $10,000 in property that they'd never received. So if you think you have been a victim of any kind of a mail scam, you want to report it to the U.S. Postal Inspection Service because they have criminal authority over it, but also report it to us so that we can put out an alert. So what kind of mail are you going to be getting? Scam mails are you going to be getting? You may get postcards for free lunches, multi-level marketing campaigns, pyramid schemes, other kinds of investments, amazing deals on investment schemes. And the AG's office just issued a settlement with precious metal dealers that were basically scamming people who were thinking that precious metals is going to be where they should invest their money because the economy may be on a roller coaster ride. The overpayment scam, if people reported just getting checks in the mail and not knowing why. If you deposited it, then someone was going to call you and say, hey, I sent that check to you by mistake. Please send it back. The lottery and sweepstakes scams, we actually had another scam buster. This gentleman won $1 million from Publishers Clearinghouse. He was so excited. No, he knew this was a scam. And it wanted about $1,100 in taxes and fees, but they provided the check from this Fortune Society entity. So it sounded all great. The idea was to deposit the check and then write a check on your own account and send it in so that they could give you your $1 million. Well, as it turned out, that Fortune Society was a nonprofit in upstate New York who had its payroll account breached. And they were an entity that worked for homeless individuals in upstate New York. So be very wary of checks that show up in the mail. We've talked about work from home scams. It could show up in the mail, as could job offer and interviews. You may get psychic offers, foreign political figures sending you the Nigerian scam, perhaps. It's possible, although we haven't heard about anything about fake census mailers, just always verify that everything looks right and maybe the copy isn't off. So be very careful about the mail because scams are coming to the mail again. So what other kinds of scams are we seeing out there during the pandemic? Well, we're seeing a lot of money schemes, and that's sort of an overarching umbrella of everything else. Money mules, pet scams, and etc. So what other kinds of items are we seeing? Counterfeit goods. 3M has been filing lawsuits left and right against companies that are claiming to be selling the 3M N95 mask. Investment schemes we've talked about. Not only are investors getting lured into prevention and cures, which the SEC has warned about. I mentioned about other kinds of investment schemes in like precious metals, etc. Money mules. A lot of times these money laundering schemes are disguised as work from home. Anytime you are required to deposit money and write a check or take goods, rebox it, and ship it out, that you're not being a freight forwarder in that case. You're not being a transfer agent. You're a money mule, and you're an unwitting participant in money laundering. Pet scams. The National Consumers League actually issued this warning about folks that were at home, lonely, they wanted a pet, and so they would look online and they would see a pet, they would send payment for it in the idea that it would be shipped, and there was never a pet. The pet wasn't shipped, and so they would go to the airport, there'd be nothing there. The eBay motor scams. The car doesn't exist. Citing COVID-19, they say, I'm not comfortable with you test driving it until we get a payment. Well, the car doesn't exist. You're never going to test drive it. The money is gone. They pull you off of eBay, off of PayPal to get money through other platforms, which makes it untraceable and unable to get the money back to you. Rental scams. Folks are using online photographs of rentals or homes that are for sale, advertising these rentals, and folks that are not comfortable going into homes when they're looking for a rental property, or using these 3D tours or these photographs to make decisions about a home they're going to rent, but that's not their home to rent, or maybe the house isn't even for rent. And so we're seeing rental scams being reported as well. It always requires just a little more due diligence to make sure that you don't fall victim to a scam. So that's the end of the presentation, and at the bottom you will see our website, which has an A to Z library, and that library has a treasure trove of information about pretty much any kind of transaction that you would get involved in as a consumer. There's also links to our social media pages. If you're not following us on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, definitely do. There is a little red comment balloon, looks like an envelope with a tail on it. You can use that to register your email address to be on our newsletter distribution list. But definitely spend some time on our website and see what kind of resources we have for you. The one item on the very front page is our complaints link. So if you do ever need to file a complaint with our office, that's the link that you would use. And again, if you have any questions for our consumer specialist, use the email address at the bottom. Thank you for your time.